Hi, I'm Patch. In my previous video, I was attempting to explain some feelings I have on Dawn of War, and on a few RTS in general, but the main point I'm trying to get across is your options early game in an RTS, and forgive me for just mouse clicking, I'm feeling very lazy today, don't feel like doing hotkeys. I'm only against an easy AI, and I'm just trying to do a demonstration video. So, basically, at the start of a game in an RTS, Dawn of War is very much the standard affair. It's what you would expect. You have your main point of production that can produce your workers. Workers are de-emphasized in Dawn of War, which isn't a bad thing, because your resources are gained in an alternate method, so workers are primary builders. And then you have your basic unit, which is the other purpose of your main base. That's all good stuff. No complaints. Give me one moment, I just need to cough.
Defending objective. Yes, my lord. Getting into position.
So, you have your basic unit, and from the start of the game of Dawn of War, Space Marines are actually fantastically designed in that you have about 3 or 4 options of paths you can go down on how you want to develop your faction, and pick your choices. Specifically, you have sniper training, which means your scouts can now use snipers, which makes them very strong anti-infantry. You can build a chapel barracks, which gives you access to the Space Marines and the commander. Or you can build an armory, which gives you an immediate option of flamers, which I'll actually do, because I think that's all I need to beat these AI, is build an armory, get flamers. And that's an option you have at the start of the game, and that's great. That's very well designed, I would say. You have 3 or 4 options on how to play and counterplay your opponent. Not a lot of games do that. Even some of the best regarded games don't give you a wide array of options. Say StarCraft. You get 1 or 2 units early on, and then you have to tech up very quickly in the first 5 minutes of the match to access more units to counterplay. And that's not a criticism. That works fine. The criticism actually comes back to Dawn of War, where, because units are hard counters, the game actually loses a lot of depth. What I strictly mean is, now that I have flamers, I just get flamers, and... oh goodness. Oh dear. I was not paying attention. But now I just get flamers on all my guys, and I basically destroy everything. But even that's not the most exasperating thing. The actual problem comes when you reach the next level of tech, which I can now do. I can now access Monastery HQ add-on and get vehicles. Once vehicles get introduced to this game, I feel like all the quality and strategic depth melt away. You lose a lot of the goodness in this game. Because like I said, at this point, at the start of the game, I had 3 options of what I want to do. Armory, chapel, snipers. Not necessarily equally valid. It would also depend on what you're fighting, what you're matched up against, and so on. But generally speaking, those are my options, and you've got those options and choices to make, which is all very good. But then you come to Tier 2, if you would like to call it, and the Monastery HQ add-on. You're a fool if you want to build the Sacred Artifact before you build the Machine Cult. The Machine Cult hard counters immediately the enemy. It does. You get, as I demonstrated in my previous video against a hard AI, quote-unquote hard, I got to vehicle tech, and that was it. It stopped being a question of, you know... oh dear, I am really not paying attention. I got to vehicle tech, and it stopped being a question of, what choice do I make, and more a question of what hard counter do I play. And in that case, it's land speeders. You build land speeders, you kill infantry. Super easy. Super common strategy for basically all the factions to tech up to vehicles and use vehicles. Because they're such a core part of every strategy. some factions use flying, some factions, use max whatever. But the same point always comes back to is that once you reach Tech 2, the strategy in the game just boils down to spam a unit and then maybe have a couple of support units. And this isn't the only game that falls victim to that, and I feel like the reason is because of this awkward specialization and hard countering to a degree. I don't know, maybe... Forgive me, still coughing. Maybe I don't understand the root of the problem. But one of the things I come back to, and I feel like this is a contributing factor, is
scouts awaiting orders.
The games, all the factions in Dawn of War have the same tech tree. Fundamentally, you have your main production building, it produces you workers and scouts, or your basic infantry unit, be it Necron warriors, your stealth suits, your missionaries. Then you have your option of a combat building or a tech building. Some factions it's a little different, like the Tau, but generally speaking you have your barracks or your tech building. And that's true for, I think, Orcs, Eldar, maybe not Eldar. It's true for Orcs, Chaos, most of the factions. Especially the Space Marine derivative factions. And then from there you tech up from your chapel barracks or your armory. From your barracks or your upgrade center you tech up to the next level, at which point you access vehicles and the game is ended. But you've accessed vehicles and a new tech center, but you want vehicles because vehicles are going to win you the game, whereas a tech center isn't. And it basically feels very reductionist and samey. I know that it's not, and many factions have strengths and weaknesses, but I feel disappointed that the factions don't have bigger differences. I found the Necrons, when they came out, to be interesting and unique. I don't know if they were balanced. I don't think anyone would argue that particularly, but when they first came out, Necrons were very unique. You didn't acquire your requisition. You acquired the rate of which you build things from your main building, which was much more important because your building could only build so fast. And then that fed into, and then you built gas, which was your actual resource that you needed. And you could, to a degree, control that. So you had this sort of pacing with the Necrons of resources that was a lot different to each other faction. And to a degree, you can understand that Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines are similar, and even Sisters of Battle, those three can be similar, because they're all very similar-y. I wouldn't say they're similar in the lore, but similarly mechanically, you can understand they all come from the same place, fundamentally. I'm sorry to anyone I'm offending. I know I intentionally picked Space Marines to offend, by the way, so I'm the most insincere person you'll ever meet. So sorry to anyone I'm offending, but yeah, they're very sort of end up samey kind of stuff. Like you can understand that they play that way. So they don't try and take it again. So I've got the AI pinned in. That's all I'm trying to do. And then from there, it's sort of, and then you tech up and you get your best thing. So, and your relic unit. Tech 3. Tech 3, best unit and relic unit. And it just ends up being a little disappointing that the factions are more crazy and diverse. Because when you've got such a diverse game like Warhammer, you'd expect the teams to be very different, but they all end up playing fairly samey, so that switching from one to the other doesn't require picking up new skills or learning new tricks or anything like that. And I'll use StarCraft again because it's a very easy point of look how strange and different this is. Going from Terran to Protoss is fairly similar, but you have to learn your building placements and things like that. And not to mention your tech tree in Protoss tends to be a lot more spread out, while Terran is very linear. Which isn't about, neither side is better or worse, it's certainly proven that much over the era. And then lastly, you got Zerg, who build almost completely differently. They produce all from their main building, like the Necrons, but the main difference is that Zerg has like a fixed rate of production. And with that fixed rate of production, they have to really just make it work. Often you'll see Zerg play very differently to the other factions. They don't tech up, they don't always just max out how many workers they have, because there's no point maxing out workers if you can't spend the resources. You need to find that careful and precise balance. And things like that make for a really interesting gaming experience. You know, factional differences that really matter, that aren't just defined by units. A tech tree that is unique, so to speak. And yes, Zerg also has a very linear tech tree, like Terran, where it is building tech, building tech, building tech. And that's, you know, if you know what I mean, where you build a building and you unlock the next level of tech. Where Terran, it's, you build a barracks, you get a factory, you get a starport. But even Zerg is different than that, because you have to build a spawning pool. Okay, now you have to upgrade your hive. Now you build your queen's nest. Now you can upgrade to a lair. Well, I think that's right. Yeah, hatchery, hive, lair. And that's unique compared to the other two factions. Protoss doesn't do that. Protoss builds a cyber core, and then they can split their tech in 3 different directions between Templar Archives, Robo Bay, and Starport. And so that's really engaging and interesting. It gives you choices and options and counterplay and metagame. And as you build these different things, more and more becomes unlocked. Which is why in the early game, I have a lot high praise for Dawn of War. At the start of the game, you have 3 tech options. One for flamers, one for snipers, one for marines, like a better unit. And then you can combine some of those things to unlock more things. You can get an armory plus a barracks, and you get assault marines. Or you can arm your marines with heavy bolters. And all these combinations come together to make a really interesting ability to counterplay what your opponent is building on the fly. You can go, well, if I just build this one tech option, suddenly my units become more diverse, they can do more things, they can play and interact in interesting ways. And then you hit vehicle tech. And that all goes out the window. They've got infantry, build a land speeder. They got vehicles, build a tank, build a, dreadnought, build whatever, kills tanks on your faction. Build rocket infantry. It becomes very reductive, and it's just so sad, because the game does have really good choices before that, and then it just falls away. I don't really have a fix for it. It's something that has to kind of be built inherent into the game, and that design style can go really wrong, but every time I see a game that has vastly different build styles, I feel a lot more endeared to it than I do when I play a game where the units build very similarly, like the factions build very similarly. I do have several counter examples against what I am saying. Things like Battle Realms, which are also on my channel, which I am very much in love with. That game, its specialness is in how different the units are, and how the units are built together. And that's core to the game experience. There's nothing to say that if you had a game, an RTS game, that could be one faction. They take a unit, they put it in one building, gets upgraded to a certain unit, then you can put it in another building, and it becomes something new, And that combination factor of training up units is a really interesting faction idea, and that could make for a really interesting gaming experience. But I guess what I was just trying to say is, I wish the game had more of that, because I feel like it hurts the game overall when you hit this machine cult, and suddenly it doesn't matter if you're building scouts with snipers, or if you're building, heavy weapon upgrades, or whatever. You're now just building vehicles, 9 times out of 10, with the occasional infantry support. Because that's the other aspect of it, is you want an army game to feel like you have a big army. Even the earliest of RTS games kind of understood that, even if they had heavy limits. Like Age of Empires having its 50 food limit sucked, but seeing 20 guys run across the screen and fight 20 guys still had a big impact. It felt like you're wielding an army, you're guiding them to go out and slap each other. Same with Command and Conquer. You'd build dozens of tanks and run up into the enemy's defenses, because that was the only way to bust defenses, was to go in straight, short of using air. We're not here to argue semantics. Or are we? And that's just how it is. I felt in RTS games, it's always been the strength of the games, have that diversity, and to wield big armies. And when you get to something like Dawn of War, and Warcraft 3 as well as the other criminal for this, I don't feel like the armies feel big. The armies never feel like you're having these epic scale battles. It feels more like small-scale skirmishes. Like, this feels kind of like a small-scale skirmish. Maybe if they had as many factions, like as many units as I did, we had like a couple of Space Marine groups and a Force Commander each, it'd feel much, much more like that, you know, like that kind of thing I'm trying to say, where it feels like a battle. I guess I'm rambling. I am. But I just wanted to get across these points where this style of game is nice, and there are tech options that are good, and the good things about RTS is having tech options and styles of play and choices you can make. But this game sort of reduces those options as you go along rather than expanding them. There are better options than other options, while you should never really think that you have a worse option. There should always sort of be a place for a unit. I mean, I know there isn't always. I know that not even StarCraft does that. Not every unit in StarCraft is useful. Looking at you, Scout. But you can still aspire to make it so that your early game units don't become irrelevant. And not through upgrades or anything like that, but because they do something that your later units don't do. Like they swarm, or they hit ground and air and they're very light to pick up. Or they can tank shots for your units that are vulnerable to tank shots. Things like that. It's something that should keep the relevance of your units. I don't feel like Dawn of War does that. I don't feel like Warcraft does that particularly well. I feel like after a point you just stop building grunts and footmen. I feel like most RTS struggle with that. Again, Command & Conquer sort of gets a pass, because infantry, especially over time, they've been given more and more unique purposes, which is definitely something to praise. I feel like Age of Empires, with how you upgrade units, is always going to be relevant. And things like that. Yeah, that's all. Thanks for watching my silly video complaining about tech trees. I felt like putting this up because I saw someone subscribe, and I really appreciate that people are subscribing to me when I don't actually do content. And it makes me want to do content when I see someone subscribe, so thank you to whoever it was. I'll look real quick. What was your name? And sorry for if the video stopped. I hope to go check out this name. Thank you, Bernard Gale, for subscribing 10 hours before I made this video. I really appreciate it. It's the little things. I don't know why I appreciate it. I'm not sure why you came here. Maybe you wanted to see some Battle Realms, because there's not a lot of Battle Realms content out there. Maybe I'll get back to that someday, but I don't promise anything. But thank you. The main issue of doing Battle Realms is you run out of things to talk about very quickly. RTS games in general, it's very hard content to talk over, because the games tend to go very decently paced and long. As you can see, this has taken me forever to kill, with 4 squads and a guy, and it's just the basic building. Or is he upgraded? I don't think he's upgraded. And that's even... he has upgraded, yeah. Anyway, thank you for watching. I'll see you again in the future with another video.